What are resources? Resources are also called factors of production. Resources are the different things that's used to provide services and also to produce goods. In economics, resources are classified into four fundamental, which are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Land includes all natural physical resources such as coal, oil, water, forest. These resources are the inputs in the production process. Secondly, human resources, which also called labor, are the human inputs in the manufacturing process like managers, workers. Thirdly, capital is the investment in the capital goods such as machinery, tools, and buildings that the human use to produce these goods and services and to provide these services. All the other three resources are combined by the entrepreneurs to produce goods and services. However, in economics, these resources are limited compared to the unlimited wants of the people. So this situation is described as scarcity.
Moreover, people have always desired and strived for improving their living conditions through increase in consumption ever since Adam put his foot on the earth. They instinctively desire more and more of products to be used compared to what they command resources to supply. Thus, scarcity of resources within the face of unrestricted proliferation of human wants, including spiritual, gives the rise to activities that we study in what has long come to be referred to as economics. The issues of fair play and justice remain the focus of attention for Arab scholars too. Islam greatly supports the equality in distribution matters. However, with the emergence of markets because of the drive of fast developing economies within the West during newer centuries, rationalism replaced faith in choice making, and ethical concerns prefers took the rear seat. But interestingly, the importance of ethical conduct in business is now resurfacing within the Western literature on corporate governance because of the worldwide devastation the present financial crisis has brought in, and therefore the mountains of ethical bankruptcy is unveiled. Islamic economics has a chance to demonstrate its healing touch, but as long as and if only the Muslim countries could produce illustration of Islamic norms at work. The fact that Islamic norms aren't shaping realities in Muslim countries has led to much misplaced argumentation between Islamic economics on the one hand and their mainstream detractors on the opposite. Both are oblivious to an easy principle of logic that one must compare the details of his system with the ideals, not realities, of the opposite. Islamic economists invariably are encampering the ideals of their system supporting what need to be with what its capitalism operational. Likewise, the opponents largely from the West attack Islamic ideals for erecting a financial system as having valid, citing the condition as they are within the present-day Muslim countries. The critics fail to understand that the long colonial past of those countries and its later continuation in several groups seldom allowed their leaders the breadth or space for implementing the Islamic agenda for social development, even once they possibly do so desired. Let one realize what Islam requires Muslims might not always be doing, and what they are doing might not always be Islamic. Goods are produced for what people want to buy, which make other necessities good to underproduce. As a result, only people who can afford it can get it, while other people who cannot don't. These are produced whether it is good for the environment or harmful and uses a lot of resources. However, in communism, the state focuses on producing only the goods people want, while they fail to produce some of the consumer's needs. Consequently, there is a surplus of the goods produced compared to the shortage of others, and this leads to the price of the goods produced rising and people can't afford it. Thus, inequality, distribution, and production of goods make people feel like the resources are scarce. Moreover, due to the inefficient allocation of the market resources are not fully utilized. Meanwhile, in Islamic economy, it disagrees with the communist and capitalist views, as Islam means submission and obedience to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So the ultimate goal of Islam is to worship and seek the pleasure of Allah. It does not favor individual selfishness to flourish like in capitalism, nor does it confiscate the means of the production and acquiring wealth, turning people to work like robots or some kind of machines on behalf of the government, like socialism. Islam believes in individual ownership, community ownership, and the state ownership, as it is written in the books of fiqh, tradition, in the Holy Quran. It is always prioritized to safeguard the social interest because it results in the achievement of equal distribution. Islam emphasized the human brotherhood and socio-economic justice, so it adopted just principles in distribution and production growth to reach those goals. So, how can the Islamic perspective of economics work in the global economy? How can government work to achieve the Islamic perspective as closely as possible? How can private businesses adjust to Islamic perspective? Lastly, is it possible for a country to provide an economy that is completely aligned with the Islamic perspective of scarcity, meaning a fully sustainable economy?
Is the Islamic perspective viable for developing countries? British economist Lionel Robbins established the concept of economic scarcity in his 1932 book, An Essay on the Nature and Significance of Economic Science. He establishes that economics is a science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means, which have alternative uses. This provides the perspective that economics is based on managing a limited amount of resources to fulfill an unlimited amount of demand. However, this perspective contradicts the Islamic perspective, which establishes that all resources are made available by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is enough for all of humanity due to all the wealth in the world coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hence responsibility being ingrained in resource use. Ethics and morals based on the Al-Quran and the Hadith is the key for guiding an economy to achieve a society with all demands of its population fulfilled. An example from the Al-Quran would be from Al-Araf Surah 731 and An-Nahl Surah 1692. By the verses presented, we could then model a country that enacts a fully renewable carbon-negative economy, reflecting the responsible use of resources and providing an active policy of poverty alleviation. These two guidelines tackle Goal 1, 11, and 12 of the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations. In theory, such an economy would satisfy all its population needs in a renewable and sustainable way, paving the way to being a carbon-negative country. Although possible, this proposition is difficult to achieve for developing countries. To achieve sustainability to its most efficient form, the best available technologies for sustainable energy and production is only possible for countries with a significant amount of wealth. Developed countries with the best technologies have a history of being major pollutants as well in the past, only recently pushing for a sustainable economy. Developing countries, most prevalently in Asia, pollute the most because of the lack of cash it has to purchase and develop sustainable methods of production. hence using methods of production that pollutes more to the environment in contrast to other more developed countries. Due to the global capitalist system, these developing countries are forced to use the most efficient means of production and not necessarily the most resource-friendly. There are also problems with choosing which energy source to use, with certain cost and efficiency drawbacks for each choice. For example, solar and wind are the most popular sources of renewable energy but do not have the consistency of producing energy as oil and coal and takes up a large amount of space. Meanwhile, water dams are very specific to the environment and are expensive to build. However, it is possible for developing countries to provide an economy similar to one provided in the doctrine of Islam by focusing on three key aspects: subsidized renewable energy, focusing on less carbon taxing products, and providing social welfare programs through zakat. Then a more equal society can be achieved. How can the government work to achieve the Islamic perspective as closely as possible? As the previous paragraph has mentioned, a model has been provided for a country to strive to achieve a less resource-demanding society. Given that, this paragraph will explore the extent to which a country can work to build said society and economy. Ignoring politics of a country, a majority of politicians would be in favor of using less resources for its general populace, which could mean a variety of benefits for the economy. However, to be able to achieve a system where all resources are utilized both responsibly and effectively, for all its citizens to use, requires strong policies in limiting the usage of resources for both the producer and consumer. Although Islam encourages the private property of wealth, responsible uses of such resources can be difficult for the ultra-rich of modern society. Likes of Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Koch brothers, George Soros, and etc. produce significantly more pollution simply by lifestyle and wealth. As a result, limiting the lifestyles of many is the responsibility of the government, as in a pure free market, it is proven that wealth is correlated directly towards carbon pollution. Provided a strong government to carry out limitations, what should a government do to provide the Islamic perspective of scarcity to all of its citizens? Firstly, chasing renewable energy solutions by providing government incentives tackles multiple sustainable development goals, such as goals 7, 8, 11, and 12, providing many opportunities for both economic growth and responsible use of resources. These incentives may include consumer-side subsidies and benefits for purchasing renewable energy solutions, such as electric cars and solar panels, and producer-side subsidies, such as reduced taxes for renewable energy production. One of the setbacks about renewable energy is the current high upfront cost due to available options being more expensive than fossil fuels for a majority of developing countries. However, as the years progress, solar and wind energy will get continuously cheaper, hence integrating such technologies will become a smoother transition as the years pass. To offset the present wastage of transitioning from fossil fuel resources to renewable energies, the government should not compromise and fully provide a widespread network of renewable energy sources. Most importantly, government incentives will allow more and more technology companies to innovate and provide better energy solutions than the ones we have currently. Secondly, providing focus on sustainable food sources will help improve climate and land utilization. This policy will focus primarily on plant-based food sources such as essential crops and vegetables, which are known to be less polluting and resource-hungry than meat-based agriculture. The biggest challenge towards this shift, however, is the palate of the general populace. The shift will definitely be unpopular with consumers' tastes that are used to daily consumption of meat. Prioritizing lower polluting meats, such as poultry, should dampen the effects of reducing meats, such as beef and lamb, which ideally should only be consumed for more special occasions. However, this shift of mindset is very helpful to lessen the resource wastage of a country as a whole due to the pressing issue of meat agriculture having a large impact on the environment. Lastly, government welfare programs are needed to prevent citizens of a country from being impoverished and reduce wealth inequality. The government needs to provide a floor for the poor to stand on and a ceiling for the rich to reach. This stands very much with the ideology of using resources responsibly. The floor for the impoverished should include government-mandated healthcare and education, as well as a progressive taxation system to provide a livable standard for all citizens. All of these policies have some form of backlash and criticism from many of the populace. However, these policies will provide a chance and a step forward for any country to be able to reach a similar ideology towards one that is provided by Islam.
How can a private property adjust in Islamic perspective? So now, what is a private property? Private property is a non-profit and non-governmental organization that is created to fund charitable cause and organization or any legal economic objective. A private property does not seek funding from general public, and it's generally funded by family or individual funding or relatives. Okay, the fund is invested and the revenue from the investment is used for fund charity. Since privately funded, it's not a subject to strict regulator oversight, enhanced disclosure requirements. A private foundation or property is a legal entity managed by a council or trustee or directors. So, what is Islamic perspective? Islam is at once a religion, a community, and a civilization. In all three senses, Islam is a resource of unique perspective on relation between science, technology, and ethics. As a religion, Islam upholds the knowledge as the key to both individual or social salvations. With the idea of unity of reality and knowledge as a guiding principle, it refuses to entertain any distinction between religious and secular in the realm of knowledge. Science and technology are relevant as the so-called religious science to the human pursuit of divine. As so many Islam thinkers have asserted over the centuries that science and technology are the most powerful and most enduring universal element in the human civilization and should be pursued for the sake of common good and in their faith peace, and Islam places strict limits on technology and subordinates scientific rationality to revolution. Islam, like capitalism, permits private ownership of property, including the means of production, and grants freedom of enterprise. Since only Allah can be the absolute owner of things, the duality of Allah's absolute ownership of property and man's relative ownership must definitely weakens the traditional view of private ownership in Islam. So, as a student, I discovered the ways to begin an enterprise in Islamic perspective. I have find three keys to begin with. First, the shopping strength of capacity consumers. From the culture, however, additional from the momentary perspective, Muslim majority nations are very various institutions of choosing among worldwide nearby advertising and marketing techniques really is upon a very great deal at the nations when organization is present. Qatar, for instance, is the primary US within the international increase of GDP consistent with capital. Countries including Indonesia, Turkey additionally have excessive normal GDP. On the other hand, in the numerous Muslim countries, nations with extremely low GDPs, including Somalia or Comoros. And the remaining one is the local falcony barriers. Will our organization be capable of input given, or it will face political and felony barriers? A principal instance of political barrier is to boycott one organization. In this case, Arab League, they boycott the Israel. The forced agencies to pick out an event they serve in Israeli marketplace or Arab League member markets. Moreover, different boycott exists which are unofficial. However, despite the fact they are impactful, the felony surroundings additional address they use or no longer use the Sharia law, or in addition of standardization certification issue in this. So this is my question, and I have discussed it. Thank you.
Is it possible for a country to provide an economy that is completely aligned with the Islamic perspective of scarcity, meaning a fully sustainable economy? There are many hoops and bounds to be leapt over for a government to provide a fully sustainable economy in the perspective of Islam. Both internal and external forces attempt to keep the global economic status quo in more ways than one. This paragraph intends to explore the possibilities of such an economy being brought into existence. Firstly, internal forces that will try to regulate environmental protectionism would be the aspects of an economy that will benefit from pollution. This would include conventional power sources such as coal and oil, factories that irresponsibly dump pollution into the air or water, farmers benefiting from meat agriculture, and many more. Regardless if the country is an Islamic monarchy or a European democracy, this aggressive push for environmentalism will be met with aggressive pushback from lobbyists of such industries. Only those committed with the beliefs of Islam and environmentalists would be in support of such propositions. The country's citizens would not always back such policies, as many work in the factories and power plants that pollute significantly into the environment. Secondly, there might be backlash from international forces such as countries and economic organizations that have a vested interest in the economic resources of a country. For example, if a government tries to heavily tax the production of oil and coal, countries that take in exports of oil and coal from said government might protest such taxes. The country that benefits from exports might retaliate by forwarding the case to the World Bank and/or International Monetary Fund. Most importantly, if a country that is politically and economically stronger has a vested interest towards a country that is trying to implement these policies, said larger country can bully the small country into rejecting the implementation of these policies. This can be done through exercising tariffs to products from the smaller country and limiting exports to the smaller country, wherein those exports to the smaller country is important in forwarding the progress towards the Islamic perspective of a country. This tactic has been done before and raised questions of the practices of the IMF and World Bank, such as the case of the IMF quote-unquote bullying Ireland. Lastly, converting the economy into one radically self-aware of being responsible with its consumption and damage to the environment might be a shell shock to its own citizens. What remains an idealist economy and society might be a very rough experience for its citizens in the short term. This can be caused through the shift in the job market for the sectors that are impacted, changes in work requirements, changes in lifestyle, and can also cause an economic recession due to the government spending on renewables. As a result, it is possible to create the economy discussed in previous questions, but it is much a better idea to implement those policies gradually and provide a long-term plan that will last multiple decades. In conclusion, Islam has recognized the presence of relative scarcity rather than absolute scarcity, because there are resources underutilized or yet to be utilized due to little knowledge, capacity, and time. Furthermore, scarcity creates the idea of scarcity in Islam, according to which it is a requirement for human beings to share their property in charity as prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam then provides an economy that is based on ethics and morals, a refreshing idea on the global system of economy, as providing one both has the potential to solve issues brought up by capitalism and provide a fairer society for countries willing to adopt such policies. As a result, we can conclude that by simply providing insight to the Islamic perspective of resource scarcity, we can explore the many ideas and topics Islam provides to the world, and we should explore more of the options concluded in Islam into the real world.